Hello and welcome to Policy Watch. This week we focus on the land acquisition bill and the government announcement of SOPs for exporters and new foreign trade policy. My guest this week is KG Narendranath, Deputy Editor of the Financial Express. Welcome to the show. Before we get into the discussion, let's get you the headlines for this week. Government clinches the deal on the land acquisition bill, gives in to BJP's demand on leasing land to developers. Bill to be tabled in the budget session of Parliament. The government announces 3,000 crore package to boost exports even as shipments rise to a 3-month high. The government hikes dearness allowance for employees and pensioners to 80% from the current 72%, move to benefit around 50 lakh employees and 30 lakh pensioners. And twin blast during the Boston Marathon leaves 3 dead and many others injured. Obama administration vows to bring the guilty to justice. Those are the headlines, and let's get you the top story right away. The land acquisition bill will be taken up in the second half of the budget session. The decision was taken at an all-party meeting held on the 18th of April. The bill will now be tabled in Lok Sabha, where a Business Advisory Committee will allot time for debate and discussion on the contentious bill. We filed a report. Take a look.
In a major breakthrough, the government today managed to get a broad consensus on the Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Bill 2011. The consensus reached in the all-party meeting paves way for the bill's consideration and passage in the Parliament.
We move towards consensus. Largely there is consensus. Of course, there cannot be unanimity, but largely there is consensus, and the object and reasons, everybody subscribes the need for this bill at the earliest.
The government agreed to the key demand of opposition BJP, which had suggested that instead of acquisition, the land be leased to developers so that the ownership remains with farmers who can continue to get regular income from their land.
बिल जब इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ, उसके बाद से लैंड माफिया बाजार में उतर गया और उसने किसान की जमीन औने पौने दाम पे खरीद ली। ये सोच कर के कल को जब ये लैंड एक्वायर होगी तो इसका चौगुना दाम हमें मिल जाएगा। तो हमने कहा कि अगर ऐसा होता है तो उससे तो इस बिल का उद्देश्य ही फ्रस्ट्रेट हो जाएगा, पर्पस ही फ्रस्ट्रेट हो जाएगा। तो अगर इस तरह की जमीन जो बिल के इंट्रोडक्शन के बाद खरीदी गई है और बाद में वहां पर अक्वायर करने की बात आती है, तो उसका कॉम्पेंसेशन देते समय 50% मुआवजे की राशि उस किसान को भी देना जिस किसान से वो जमीन खरीदी गई थी, उसको सरकार ने स्वीकार किया।
However, several parties, including the left, Samajwadi Party and UPA's former ally DMK, still have reservations over the bill. The CPIM has demanded consent of all the families affected due to the acquisition of land, and Samajwadi Party wants that only barren land should be allowed for acquisition.
किसी भी बिल पर पूरी सहमति कभी नहीं बन पाती है। अब जो फैसला होगा वो सदन में ही होगा।
With the government agreeing to the key demands of the BJP, the bill is set to be tabled in the Lok Sabha for debate and discussion, after which it will be put to vote. In its current form, the bill seeks to address problems of industry regarding acquisition of land for setting up projects and providing for land acquisition, rehabilitation and resettlement of the displaced people.
There you go, at least a consensus in sight on the land acquisition bill. 6 long years, the bill has been debated and re-debated. So many contentious issues there as well. Almost introduced once but left behind. But now finally they might be able to table it in the second half of the budget session, which starts, I think, very soon. How important is this bill going to be? Industry has for very long maintained that the government's failure to push through this bill has hampered their progress. Will it satisfy them now?
It may not completely satisfy the industry because there was, of course, a need for a cohesive national level law, a benchmark law for states to follow on how to acquire land for public purpose. Public purpose is defined in this bill. And there is, of course, a need for the people now employed in the agriculture sector, which contributes only 15% or thereabouts to GDP now, but around 65 crore people, around half of Indian population
is employed in it.
Is employed there. That means around 10 to 15 crore households. So there is, of course, a need for moving a large section of people, maybe 20-25 crore people, from depending on agriculture for livelihood to industrial areas, particularly manufacturing.
Right.
So this is a great need. This need cannot be overemphasized. So this bill is a step in that direction. Now there's a lot of confusion Because it is kind of the industry goes to we have Nandigram, Singur, such cases.
Right.
The industry goes, forcibly takes the land. The farmers are not given adequate compensation.
Then there is agitation and
then
it all
there is
stops.
agitation. So there is a need for a code of conduct, a proper law, so that the land acquisition can work on those principles.
But do you think Jairam Ramesh himself, he gave an interview to a newspaper and he said that he thinks the government has taken a middle path and he's tried to make everyone happy. But do you think that middle path is what the country really needs right now? Is it too much compromise?
We need, of course, a middle path. But the question is, what is the middle path? There needs to be fair compensation to the displaced people, the affected families. There's no question about it. Fair compensation here, this bill is giving upfront payment. Then there is, in addition, they have prescribed certain, four times in the case of rural areas, 2 times in the case of urban areas. Additionally, there are additional entitlements of upfront payment, which people can choose. But the point here is that people also should have a say. They should also have a share in the subsequent development of the land.
Right.
Then only it can be called a fair compensation.
You can't just give the land away and whoever purchases it.
And the subsequent urbanization, and the land value will substantially increase manifold because of subsequent urbanization. For that also, there's a share. The share should be given to the affected families.
Right. Who originally owned the land.
Originally owned the land.
Right.
So that's also a fair way. But industry may not be happy because industry, at least it makes it easier for them.
Right.
Earlier it was a very complex situation. Now it will make easier for them. It may not make it as less costly as they would have imagined.
Right.
But it is important that, as I said earlier, there should be a shift of a large section of people to the manufacturing sector. So we have to have the, even farmland for fertile land should also be used for industry purposes.
Point taken. The point about the clause about farmers whose land will be purchased will be given 4 times in rural areas and twice the land value in urban areas. Does that sit well in your opinion, or is it sort of a result of parties like the main opposition party wanting to present a pro-farmer image for political reasons and pushing for it, and the government having no choice but to agree to it?
The politician and the industry nexus, and that is everywhere.
Yeah.
So even now, some industries are saying it is actually you are not allowing fair price discovery. There should be a market-based transaction. You know what kind of market-based transactions happens in India. So if it is fair market-based transaction, the industry could have also gone and got the consent. But many a times, this government and the industry or the political establishment and industry can act in collusion and even forcibly take the land away. We have such instances.
Right.
So it is important that we have a code of a law for that, so that the principles are laid down. But still, there is a lot of discretion element.
Are you saying there should be a separate law or a separate code of conduct in addition to the land bill?
No, I'm not saying that. The land bill itself should define most of the principles in a fairly clear way. And then there are certain areas, for example, public purposes defined in the Act. It says that government can take land on behalf of private projects also if it is for public purpose.
Right.
Production of public goods or provision of public services.
Right.
So there is need for, there is a lot of discretion with the government. So it is important how the political establishment uses this discretion.
Right. The bill also will now include the clause which says that instead of selling land to developers, it will be leased. And that was also a demand from the opposition. Is that a way to ensure a regular income for the people who give their land, or could it also be a way of keeping the land mafia at bay?
So that's a right way actually, because as I said earlier, the people should also get a share of the subsequent increase in the land value. And they should have an annuity or a regular income. Or even a part of the developed land can be given back to the people. So that
if they so desire.
Instead of ownership rights, taking away the ownership rights from them, the lease option may be a better option, I think.
Right. Jairam Ramesh has quipped, the bill has come under attack from both industry organizations like FICCI and CII have criticized it. So on one hand, industry is not happy. On the other hand, activists are, going for Jairam Ramesh. Activists like Medha Patkar, they're not happy with it. So Ramesh has quipped that with both of these people attacking the bill, he must be doing something right with the bill. Do you agree with that?
He could be right in a way, because if both the people are not happy, that means he is at least trying to tread the middle path, and the right balancing he is doing on that.
But overall, how do you see that the land bill has come now? It will be tabled in Parliament very soon. Do you think overall Mr. Ramesh has done the majority of the mandate given to him, or do you think it's a decent enough bill to actually move forward from where we are right now?
It's a good enough bill, but as I think, there are certain areas which need further definitions, and also about the leasing part. And the people having right over the subsequent value addition happening in the land
good
area.
Amendments.
Those things should also happen. And then if it is a proper law, then it should also be easier. It should be hassle-free for the industry to get the land also. So it should tread a middle path. This bill is a step in that direction, but maybe more fine-tuning may be required.
But my last question on this story, do you think even if as and when the bill is passed, because all parties seem to be okay with it now, and then it will be tabled very soon, and I don't see any major problems in getting it passed, but do you think it will have that much of an impact that we had expected, or we had envisaged, that the bill is passed now, and do you think it will affect the economy as positively as we hope it will?
No, immediately it may not have an effect on the economy, because even after the bill is passed, its implementation, how it is implemented.
That's the key.
That's the key. Because then even after these principles being laid down, there can still be questions, there can still be disputes. Because there is a lot of discretion which still political establishment has to apply. And some groups can go to the court. So even after this law, considering Indian conditions, one cannot be sure that everything will go in a smooth way.
And it's also that he's left it up to the states and on how to implement it, and how much land to acquire and what limits to set. So there could be a difference there as well, because no state can be the same.
So
that's true. There could be a difference.
And also the bill says that even fertile land can be acquired, because fertile land needs to be acquired. It cannot be possible that we can acquire only barren land. And even there has put some upper limits. So 5% of total area. The cumulatively should not go beyond 5% of the total multi-crop irrigated land. So such conditions are being set. I hope so. This is a balanced bill, and if it is enacted and implemented in the right spirit, that could lead to faster industrialization, and there cannot be major issues of social justice also.
Right. On that, like most reforms, the implementation, of course, will be the key, says KG Narendranath. We'll take a small break right now. We'll come back with the other story on Policy Watch this week. That is a new foreign trade policy. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Policy Watch. The government has announced various SOPs to boost India's falling exports. The country's exports declined by nearly 1.8% last year despite a weak rupee. The government also relaxed norms for setting up special economic zones that drive India's exports. We filed this report. Take a look.
Commerce Minister Anand Sharma has a tough job on his hands of reversing the decline in India's export at a time of global slowdown. India is a net importer with trade deficit of $190 billion, and boosting exports is important to bridge India's current account deficit that is expected to hover around 5% of the GDP this year.
We have decided not only to extend the zero duty EPCG scheme beyond March 2013, but also to merge it with 3% EPCG scheme. Now the zero duty EPCG scheme will be available to all sectors.
The Commerce Minister also announced relaxation of land requirements for setting up special economic zones. For multi-sector special economic zones, the minimum requirement of land has been reduced to 500 hectares from 1,000 hectares, while for single-sector special economic zones, the requirement of land has been halved to 50 hectares. 2% interest subvention scheme to labour-intensive sector has been extended, which is expected to benefit the labour-intensive textile sector. The government has also listed several measures to reduce high transaction costs for exporters.
The cost of exports has to come down. That is the interest portion of the interest has not come down. Secondly, the power cost, the shortage of electricity power in the manufacturing sector has affected badly our exports. And all these things also has to be addressed. If you are giving 1% here, 1% there, 2% more incentive is not going to solve the problem.
But there is a silver lining. The data released on Thursday shows that India's monthly export rose by 7% to nearly $31 billion in March. This is the third straight month of rise in exports. Meanwhile, India's imports declined by 2.87% in March due to softening of crude prices, reviving hopes for reduction in trade account deficit as the country is almost entirely dependent on imported oil to meet its energy requirements.
You heard the Commerce Minister Anand Sharma say his piece there. Now, India registered a decline of 1.76% in exports at 300.6 billion in 2012-13. These are the figures of 2012-13. But the last 3 months have seen a decent stabilization. But even then, the new foreign trade policy, the export swaps, they come at the right time, do you think?
No, the export swaps are not so big, in terms of the quantum of the swaps.
They've announced measures, but
they announced
you don't
measures,
think,
and the point is that every year there will be some incremental addition to the swaps. More than that, what we need on a long-term perspective is to increase the competitiveness of our manufacturing industry.
Right.
All factors of production in the manufacturing sector, land acquisition should be easier, clearance should be faster, investment should happen in a more productive way and in a timely manner. Other factors like labor, all should become internationally competitive way. Raw material we should get at competitive prices. On that, the resource allocation policy is also very important. So there are a lot of export-intensive, labor-intensive industries, which are job-oriented industries like textile industry,
MSMEs.
engineering industry. So these sectors have tremendous potential to grow. So this is actually the time India should have had a very higher share of the global manufacturing exports. Unfortunately, because of our policies and other issues of the country.
Also external factors.
External factors. This is the immediate situation. Even earlier, we were not actually growing our exports as we should have, if we compare with China and many other countries. So now, in the recent years, there is a world trade contraction or a very slow growth in world trade. Last year, it was only 2.7%. So we were also affected because of that. Despite our rupee being relatively depreciated during the last year, still we could not achieve, we are a far cry from our export target. Targets are being set by the ministry without any assessment of that. You have a $60 billion difference between the target and the achievement.
Right.
So that means the targets are very ambitious.
That's a huge difference.
Very ambitious. And our imports are also growing. Our imports are growing particularly because of gold imports and crude oil imports. Crude oil imports is inevitable. That's inevitable imports. When global crude oil prices go up, our crude import bill also increases. But gold imports are not inevitable. That's because of the people's tendency and mindset to invest in safe haven investments and all. The government was trying to discourage these kind of imports. We should also have more productive imports. The imports which can be used for value addition and manufacturing and for exports also.
For example, like what can that be?
Raw material kinds of imports, so which can be used for our export intensive industries for value-added exports.
Right.
For example, gems and jewelry, all the kind of exports.
That can be encouraged.
That can be encouraged. That is not any economy at the stage of India's development will have a large import bill. It is quite natural. But the point is that we are importing mostly unproductive things. And oil imports, which are only because of the global crude oil prices, we are dependent on the global economy. That's why our oil imports are rising.
Let's talk about the policy for a bit and the measures that they've announced. SEZs, for example, very important. The new rules for SEZs will allow IT firms to claim tax breaks by moving offshore work to duty-free enclaves. That should boost the SEZ sector. It has been lagging for a while after that big SEZ push a while back. SEZs sort of dropped off the radar, right? Will that help SEZs come back with a big bang?
The special economic zones in this country are mostly small zones in comparison to the big, large zones in China or many other countries. So our SEZs are actually have not been very successful. Frankly, they have not been very successful. There is a 30% or 35% increase in SEZ exports, but that is primarily because of the low base and also because of one particular unit, that Reliance Jamnagar refinery.
Right. The Jamnagar refinery was like shining light of that SEZ sector.
And then IT SEZs and some single product SEZs. So this reducing the minimum land requirement will help some SEZs to become viable. More SEZs may come up which are not able to acquire land, enough land may come up also. So that may be of some help to the industry.
Right.
But the overall, what is important is to increase the manufacturing competitiveness of the industry, and one of the basic objectives of SEZ is also the increase in manufacturing competitiveness only.
Do you think, and this is slightly digressing from the point, do you think that the government hasn't done enough for the manufacturing sector? Is that why the manufacturing sector, despite being one of our biggest drivers of the economy, hasn't really done as well as it should have been?
Manufacturing sector is not as big a driver of the economy as it should be. That is because of traditionally of lot of flawed policies which existed in various sectors of the economy, and also the labor policies, the land acquisition policy, and other related manufacturing industry has not become sufficiently competitive. Tax policies also, tax refund system for exporters. Our system is somewhat opaque. It is not fully, all the tax remission taxes may not be reimbursed.
Right.
State level taxes may not be completely reimbursed even now. So now when the GST comes, this may help improve the tax competitiveness of Indian industry in comparison to the many other competing industries in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one big boost, the one big move that the Commerce Minister also talked about. It said the government has decided to extend the Export Promotional Capital Goods, or EPCG, which allows exporters to import machinery and capital goods at zero duty completely, would be extended beyond March 2013, and that would be applicable to all sectors. That is a big move.
That's a fairly okay move, because this EPCG scheme existed for long.
Before as well, yeah.
So there is now 3% duty and 0% duty, two schemes.
Now they've merged it.
Now they merged it. That means everybody will now get 0% duty, and for a longer period. So that will help some industries to acquire their competitiveness, cost competitiveness. They can acquire capital goods at reduced cost. This may be of help. But generally, there is an investment languishing in the economy.
Right.
So that has to be addressed because of macroeconomic policies also, and all the required policies to increase the competitiveness of the manufacturing industry will only help in the medium to long term in increasing our export competitiveness and fully realizing our potential in the global markets.
Right. On that note, sir, we'll have to end our show. Many thanks, KG Narendranath, for joining us on Policy Watch. That, of course, was the Deputy Editor of the Financial Express, KG Narendranath, talking to us about two stories. The first top story on Policy Watch this week was the land acquisition bill. The government has, in fact, achieved some sort of a consensus on it. The BJP is on board. The left seems to be on board as well. It will be tabled in the budget session, the second half of the budget session in Parliament. Land acquisition bill is was a huge reform measure that the UPA had promised, of course. My guest seems to think that it will, of course, help. But it might not show results in the short term. It could take some time, as of course there are still critics of the land acquisition bill saying that this is not really enough. Activists like Medha Patkar slamming the bill. Industry is not really all that happy, but we do agree on one thing, that this is perhaps a step in the right direction. We had to start somewhere. The bill is ready. It will be tabled in Parliament now. The key, of course, like my guest said today, will be the implementation of the minor clauses in that particular bill. Our second story on Policy Watch this week was the 3,000 crore package to boost exports. The last 3 months have been okay for the Indian economy. Before that, the whole year, the shipments did decline, but the last 3 months have been okay. The manufacturing sector needs to perform well. The measures that have been announced, of course, the EPCG, the Export Promotion Capital Goods policy, it existed before as well. It's been merged with this new one and has been extended till the March of 2013. But of course, export competitiveness needs to increase for us to actually realize our targets, and like my guest said, targets and what actually is realized, there's a huge gap between that. That's all the time we have on Policy Watch this week. We'll see you next week again. Thank you. Goodbye.